We'll look at promises, so how we can use promises for asynchronous programming in JavaScript, building on the last video that we saw how we can use callbacks and run asynchronous function. So building on that only, these promises are used. So promises are a new sort of feature in JavaScript introduced in 2015, and they are objects representing the eventual completion of an asynchronous operation and resulting in. So sometimes we don't know what will happen or what will be the value of something. So some people say promises should be called futures also, right? So if there is some code which we don't know what will happen to its value, right? So but we want to write it, so we can write that in a promise, right? And then based on how that eventually turns out, we can assign certain functions. So we can assign certain callbacks, say the function, the whatever execution we were doing was success, then do this. If it was a failure, then do this. So we'll see a small demo, then maybe you will understand it more in a better manner. But the main fundamental of promise is for asynchronous programming, where we don't know what will happen, like promise in real life also, right? If I promise you to do something, so in future I might do it, right? I might not do it, and based on how if I do it, then something I will maybe become a good person. If I don't do it, then I will become a bad person. But what JavaScript gives us is a sort of way to write it in present moment. So futures we can write in present using promises. So let's take a small see a small demo to understand it better. So very simply we can define a promise by saying new promise, right? And we can define a function. So inside the promise we define the function which is also called the executor function, and this is the function where which has the async function, right? So inside the function we say setTimeout, right? And in the setTimeout we can define a callback, right? In a setTimeout we pass the callback, which is the function which will be executed after the time we give. Very simply we are saying, so you can say 5 seconds, 5 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds, right? So what we are saying is so after 500 milliseconds uh, just log done, right? This is what we are saying in the set timeout, and we are defining this inside a promise function. So this is the asynchronous. Remember we said promise are used for asynchronous operation. So this is an asynchronous operation. Why? Because of set timeout, right? And we have defined it inside a promise. So we don't know what will happen after 5 seconds, but uh, but we can define it as yet, right? And also it is non-blocking. So if I say console.log of say uh, right anything 5, right? So now let's do it. So 5 is printed, and then this is on the queue, remember, and then after 5 seconds it's printed, right? And also we can see promise. So the state of the promise, remember we saw or sorry I maybe did not let you know. So promise always has 3 states. Either it's pending, right, because it's in future. Say I promise to you that after 2 days I will do something, so till the 2 days have passed, it's the state of the promise is pending. Then after 2 days either I will keep it or I will not keep it, so that is rejected. So we saw that the state of the promise is pending, though our function is over, right? So why is it pending? Why it's not fulfilled or rejected? Because we did not resolve it. So what another thing which we can do is pass to argument to this executor function, right? This is very important. Inside every promise we have the executor asynchronous function, right? And we have to resolve this manually. So we have to say resolved. Anything you can pass inside this resolve, but we have to call this. So now the promise will be resolved after 5 seconds. Let's try out if it works. So if I just see the state of promise right now, so it's pending, right? And now done. Now let's see the state of the promise. It is fulfilled. Great, right? So the promise is resolved. Also the result value is given, which is resolved, which is what you passed here. You can pass any value here, right? So very simply, and we saw how we can resolve a promise, and similarly we can see how we can reject. We just have to say reject, right? Then another thing is promise dot then, right? So maybe on the resolution we want to do something, right? We say console.log, and we can pass the value only or anything else, right? Depends on your case. So what I'm saying is, if it's resolved, then just call this function. So I pass a resolution callback, right? This is because it's resolved, it's called, and I can define a reject callback, right? And it's not called because it's not rejected, right? The promise has been fulfilled, right? So this is how you define a promise, and then you can do dot then and call the whatever you want to do after that. Okay, so we saw promise object start when we create it's in pending, then it can be resolved or it can be rejected, right? This we saw fulfilled, rejected. These are the three states. Pending is when working, fulfilled whatever the result value or the error value, right? Then we'll come to async await. So async await are just a syntactic sugar, right? So we'll see how we can convert our whatever we have written into an async await kind of thing. So what I will do is put this whole thing in a function. So I'll say my promise, right? And I will, inside this only, I will do the promise dot then, right, function. Maybe the syntax will be a bit convoluted to you, but once you will do it for some time, then it will feel easier, right? So what I am doing is right, and then I should close this as well, right? So I have converted this whole promise, defining of the promise, and then execution of or the callback based on success or failure inside a function, right? Now I can call this function my promise, right? Now after 5 seconds, first then should be printed, and then oh sorry, I did not resolve the promise, sorry, right? Now it's fine, right? Now after 5 seconds then should be printed, and then result should be printed, right? Oh, my bad again, sorry, you have to pass here as well. Five seconds seem a long time, but yeah. Now you see then done, because this is called, and then since the promise is resolved, then this is called, right, which just gives a resolved value, whatever value you pushed here, right? Now to convert into async await, what I have to do is I have to put a keyword here, async, and this whole thing I can replace with a very simple await of promise. So what it will do is, first it will convert it into asynchronous function, right? And then what it will do is it will await on the promise. So await awaits on the promise, whatever promise is passed. So this is the promise. So await will wait till this time, till this thing is done, which will then give the result out as resolved, and then it will log this. Let's see if this works out. We have to call it, right? 5 seconds seem a long time. Yeah, this works as well, right? So remember this async, if you are using a wait keyword, async has to go there. Without async this function will not work, right? So yeah, this is it. I mean very simple demonstration, very basic introduction to promises used in case of asynchronous programming. And basically you define and execute a function, and then you, depending on the state, whether it's resolved or not, you call the then function, right? We saw it. And either the function will be resolved or rejected. Based on that you can do it. Also you can use async await keywords, which make the syntax even better, right? Rather than writing that dot then, you can just use await, and async function also return you promises. So yeah, this is it. Next we'll study about DOM. Any questions, please let me know.